I'm Belen Dumont, reporter editor for the Latino News Network and your host. Amid the national elections, let's talk about the importance and role of local government, including how residents can get directly involved with issues important to them. So joining our discussion today is Boston City Councilor Enrique J. Pepén. Enrique, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm excited to get into our conversation. But to start off, I was hoping that you could briefly introduce yourself and share some of your personal background.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to do that. My name is, again, Enrique Pepén. I am a first-term city councilor here in Boston. I just started this January, so we are a little over 10 months in now. And this is my first time ever serving as an elected official. And as a Latino, I'm also the youngest Boston City Councilor right now. There's a lot of things to learn here. There's a lot of perspectives to bring here to the City Council. But a little bit more about me and my personal background is that my parents are both Dominican immigrants. They got to Boston in the 1990s, and then I was born here. So I am a Dominican American, but I was raised Dominican. My first language was Spanish, eating arroz, habichuela, y con pollo guisado every day. Um, and I actually went to a bilingual school, so Spanish was very much part of my upbringing. And I was able to really live with that upbringing of being proudly Latino, Hispano here in the city of Boston, where luckily it is a very diverse city, um, but still with a lot of obstacles. So just happy to serve and represent our community here in the Boston City Council, where I'm now one of three Latinos. So it's we're making progress here in the city of Boston in terms of representation, and I'm happy to be a part of that.
So before you began your civic career, I'm wondering how you may have gotten involved with your community and then what has inspired you to get civically involved.
Yeah, so it all goes back to when I was about 8 years old, 9 years old, when my parents got a notice that we had to move out of where we lived. I grew up in Boston public housing over in Charlestown, and we got a notice that they were going to renovate the building, so we had to leave, get a new place to live. Thing is, my parents didn't speak English at the time, and as the firstborn, the only one that really spoke English in the household, I had a younger sister, but she was a baby. Um, I had to take the responsibility of translating and to figure out what was going on, what can we do, all while I was 9 years old. So that kind of opened my eyes as to like what is real life? What does that mean? And helping my parents navigate that process. Luckily, we did meet a very good city employee at the time that helped us relocate and found my parents a unit somewhere else. And that got me thinking about, okay, what other things are people going through in the city? So I got involved in student council in middle school. I did Model United Nations. I was the class president of our middle school, and I invited the former mayor of Boston, Mayor Menino, to the graduation. And he responded to me personally and he attended. So that kind of set the tone for me of like, this guy is a busy man, but he had the time to respond to me. And I'm just an eighth grader graduating from middle school. So I knew that I wanted to go into city government. And in high school, I was part of the student council again, all United Nations. But I also had the opportunity to start internships. My first internship was with a former city councilor, Tito Jackson, who represented Roxbury back in the day. So through his office, I was able to learn the importance of constituent services. And what is that? That is when you connect residents to city services, making sure that they know how to navigate City Hall. If there's any legislation that we pass inside City Hall, making sure that they know about it. If there's any grant opportunities, making sure we're sharing that. Or simple things, like if there's a pothole that needs to be filled in the seat in the street, we reach out to Public Works, get it done. That I fell in love with that because I saw that we had the opportunity to directly impact people's lives. And I think that really resonates with just municipal government in general. I always say it's the most personal type of government. It's face to face, it's on the ground. And after that, I had a few other gigs where I was working with folks. I worked for former Congressman Joe Kennedy, where I had the opportunity to assist some Latinos. It was during the time of Huracán Maria, when that hit Puerto Rico. Um, a lot of the Puerto Ricans actually went to Fall River, Massachusetts. Why? I think that there was just a small population of Puerto Ricans there that they knew, but a lot of people came. So it was our job to help them apply for housing there, making sure that the kids were getting registered into school, making sure that they had food resources, etc. So I had the opportunity to look at things from a federal perspective, a much larger perspective, and understand that there are different types of resources out there that impact people's lives as well. Not to mention, I also took care of Social Security casework, Veterans Affairs casework, and immigration casework, which it's a whole other ballgame. After that, I actually went to go work for a nonprofit called Transportation for Massachusetts, which is where I was able to get my transportation policy background, which I will talk about a little bit later, and work on things like adding a bus lane on the Tobin Bridge for the 111 bus that goes from Chelsea to Haymarket. And that is the most used bus by Latino population in this entire state of Massachusetts. So we tried to make it that it's easier for folks to get from Chelsea on a much timely manner into downtown Boston. Then I had the opportunity to work for the current mayor of Boston as the director of neighborhood services, where I was able to oversee all 20 neighborhood liaisons of the entire city to make sure that all the information was being spread appropriately to all neighborhoods and that people had someone to reach out to because obviously not everyone can reach out to the mayor at the same time. So they were the extension to the mayor. Then I found the opportunity that I saw an open door to run for office, and I decided to put my hat in the race. And it was interesting because in the history of that district, you've only had one other person of color to have that seat. And as a young Latino, I was like, why not me? Um, and here we are, 10 months later, well, a year later now, because that was during the campaign. I'm lucky to say that we did win, and now I get to represent the neighborhood I call home, which is Roslindale and Hyde Park and Mattapan.
It's really nice to see that journey and just hear about all these different areas of experience, and just how you can pick up all these different, right, just areas of knowledge that you can now bring to your role and how they kind of like come together and intersect. Because that's great to hear. I think sometimes we can think that the path to office or a certain position is linear, like, you're just meant to, yeah, be in that position, but it sounds like it really is a journey. So I think that can be inspiring for a lot of folks who might be going in different directions and figuring that out. Um, and then, yeah, so thank you for that. And then going into that, I'm wondering that when you did start your role and becoming city councilor, there might have been any social cultural pressures that you experienced feeling like representing your community.
Yes. Um, I say yes because there's a sense of like responsibility that you take on when you just become a city councilor in general. Um, it's an honor to have this position. Pero when you are a Latino in a community where 20% of the population is identified as a Latino or Latina, it doesn't matter if I only represent Hyde Park, Roslindale, or Mattapan. I have Latinos reaching out to me from Charlestown, East Boston, South Boston. So they don't see that boundary. Just because they see that I'm a Latino, oh, he understands he understands me. And that to me, it's not like pressure, but it's like I put pressure on myself because I gotta make them proud. I have to show them that they do have a voice on the city council that knows what they go through on a daily basis, knows their culture, knows the fact that the sacrifices that have been done by their families to be here in the city of Boston, to perhaps not even knowing where to go sometimes for resources. And now that I'm here, it's like, how do I make it easier for folks to navigate Boston City Hall? And I thought about that yesterday, actually. We just celebrated yesterday, I mean Tuesday, October 16th. We celebrated Latinx Heritage Month celebration here at Boston City Hall, and we were able to honor what we call las pilares de la comunidad, the community pillars of the Hispanic community. And just seeing the room filled with folks that have been in Boston. Some of them, they said they've been in Boston for over 50 years, 60 years. Um, and the amount of work as we've come so far away, so far along. It's like, all right, there's been a lot of sacrifice done by other generations. Let's make sure that we make them proud. Um, so that's the kind of social pressure I feel. It's more of a sense of like you can't let them down, and you have to make sure you make Boston better for them and for the next generation to come.
Right, that makes sense. And as we were talking about how there's more diverse representation, I feel like you can share that as well. It's not just on one person anymore. So I think we can get more into that in a little bit about the importance of having more than one individual, right, represent that community because it's amazing, but it is a lot. Um, I was wondering if you could just break down your role and like your basic responsibilities as District 5 City Councilor.
Yeah. So on paper, I represent the three neighborhoods, Roslindale, Hyde Park, Mattapan. What does that mean? That means that I'm their voice in the Boston City Council. That means if there's any constituent service requests that are needed, as like I said before, is it a pothole? Do they need more stop signs? Do they need to, I don't know, fix a playground? I'm their voice. I have to make sure that I'm advocating for them. Another thing that I do that is really important is policy, is to think about what the city of Boston needs in order to improve. What is broken? How can we fix it? What is good now? How can we make it better? Examples is, how do we make transportation better for everyone? How do we make resources for small businesses more accessible? How do we fix our education system? And thinking about different topics like that and working with our colleagues to find a solution and find compromise. The third biggest part of the job is city's budget, is to make sure that we are looking at the different departments and the different capital plans and the budget to make sure that there's adequate funding for everyone, because that's how the city runs. And it's my job to make sure that I'm advocating for my district to make sure that there's proper funding for public works, for the streets department, for the renovation of the municipal buildings, for the renovation of a school playground. It's all part of the course. And then also, you are you are a voice for champion progress in the city of Boston. It's you may be in a community meeting one day and people are complaining about not being able to afford rent anymore. So it's your job to really think about how can we make this, how can we improve the situation for everyone? So you start to brainstorm a lot and you start to, it's like, I always like to say, it's like a puzzle. The city government, the city council, you're like trying to solve a puzzle of many moving pieces, people from different perspectives, different cultural backgrounds, different social economic situations. But we all make this one perfect puzzle that makes the city of Boston.
As someone I've historically struggled with understanding local government and government in general, so I appreciate the analogies too. I think that does help kind of wrap it up. But that is such a, yeah, so diverse range of responsibilities. So I guess we kind of already touched upon this, but I guess quickly, because although, national politics, they do greatly shape our lives, a lot would argue, or many would argue, that local and state politics have more of a direct impact on residents. And you did kind of mention this. So I was wondering, what's your view on it, on this take?
Yeah, it's municipal government is, I said this, it's face-to-face government. It's the people you're going to run into. The amount of times I'm sitting at a coffee shop and I see residents that I know, and they have the opportunity to ask me a question about what's going on, it's more than often. And like just today, we had conversations about how potentially the taxes in the city of Boston are going to increase for homeowners or commercial businesses. Um, then we also have conversation. I've had many conversations with parents about like the quality of our Boston public school system. And when you think about stuff like taxes and public education, that's not the federal government talking about that every day. It's your city councilors, your mayors, your state representatives. Those are folks that are on that day to day. Yes, the federal government can think about the federal grants and the federal programs that make it all run. But in terms of like the key decisions on a day-to-day basis, that happens here inside City Hall. And it makes me sad that when you compare the turnout percentage for a federal election compared to a municipal election, I mean, almost 40% of the population voted for the president, which is still 40%, which is pretty low. But when you compare it to my race, it was only like close to 9%, 10% of the population. I'm just like, what is the gap? What do we got to do better? Um, Obviously, there's a lot more money going into federal campaigns that they're all over the news, they're all over social media. But I think that once people realize the actual work that we do, they realize that, oh, okay, like this is stuff that impacts us on a daily basis.
Our next topic, which is really about how your office is looking to organize 3 hearings relating to school transportation safety and how each one really focuses on a different aspect on this issue, as outlined in your op-ed that was published in MA Latino News. So I was wondering if you could share about the work that is currently being done and then where there's still room for improvement when it comes to school transportation safety.
Yeah, and just to give an audience an understanding as to why I'm even working on this is because one of the main topics that we get via emails and phone calls is parents are concerned about speeding vehicles, um, and how that causes a danger to students trying to get to school. And what we've had actually experienced already, we've already seen is this multiple staff members getting hit by a car, in my district. One of them on Cummins Highway in Roslindale, to be specific, and they had to be out of commission for a while. The other one close to the Chittick School in Hyde Park. And when you think about that, it's just like, does it get any more real than that? These are actual examples of what can happen and have happened. And one day after school, I was waiting with a group of parents for the school bus to arrive because they were complaining that people were violating the stop sign of the school bus. I kid you not, when we were there, this is on Washington Street in Roswell, very busy street. Car zooms by the stop sign, almost hits one of the kids trying to cross the street. So for me, that's all I need in order to advocate for these changes. But for the folks that haven't read the articles yet, I'm advocating for safe school zones. That is the first one. School zone is when you add specific transportation infrastructure around the school area. These could be speed humps, raised crosswalks, bump outs, um, better. They call it daylighting when you do not allow parking right next to a crosswalk so that a car can actually see the pedestrian trying to cross the street instead of trying to guess. Um, there isn't a uniform plan yet in the city of Boston. They haven't done it. There is different guidelines depending on which school, but I'm trying to find one that we could do uniform all around. And luckily, we have been able to make some progress. They're actually piloting my idea in 7 schools at the moment in the city of Boston, one of them in my district. So we have a good sense. That was back in March. We had the working session in April, and now they started to implement it this school year. The other one is making sure that there's enough civilian crossing guards. Crossing guards are like angels. They're the ones that stand at a crosswalk, making sure that kids and parents and staff members are able to cross the street safely. This impacts everyone. But in the city of Boston, there's over 50 openings right now to become a crosswalk. That is 50 crosswalks that are vacant. No one's there. And we are trying to explore what makes sense. Do we move it away from the Boston Police Department? Who who should we be talking to from different municipalities to know what they're doing? Um, but also trying to be creative as well. Like, can a crossing guard do other jobs as well after? Because this is there, it's only a part-time job, 15 hours a week, so it's not really good pay. So it's like, how do we give more incentives for folks to do the job? And then the last one, which is probably one of the more important ones that we really want to make sure that we get, is to allow the use of cameras for traffic enforcement on the stop signs of a school bus. Other cities have done it. However, there's an old state law that prohibits the city of Boston from using cameras for traffic enforcement. I'm not sure why, but if you've ever went to Providence, Rhode Island, you could actually see that if you run a red light over there, you immediately see a flashing light taking a picture of your plate. That's not allowed in Boston. And if you go up to Salem, Massachusetts, Peabody, Massachusetts, they're actually piloting these things of installing cameras on the stop signs of the school bus. And what they found is that in the first 5 weeks, sorry, over 800 vehicles violated the stop sign. So if that's happening in Peabody, Massachusetts, imagine Boston, where it's a major city with a lot more cars. And What I just want to avoid, I have two kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. They're going to go to school soon. I want to make sure that when my kids and everyone's kids go to school, we all feel safer. And nothing speaks to everyone like more like making sure our kids are safe. So that's why I'm really pushing for it. And that's why transportation has really been an emphasis in my office. And I don't, and like I mentioned earlier, I work for transportation for Massachusetts. So I come with this perspective of like, I've worked on this before and I know that this is very important. So I want to make sure that we're doing it in the city of Boston.
Appreciate you outlining that and kind of explaining some of these definitions as well, and right, what that really safe school safety zone entails. I think at times, right, we kind of assume that these things should work. You would think stop sign is enough to have someone
Yeah.
stop, but right, there are a lot of additional efforts that need to be taken. So I appreciate you going into detail.
I also like to put the responsibility on drivers as well. You said it perfectly, Billing, that a stop sign can be there, but it's up to us to make sure that we are respecting it. Um, so when you're driving, to anyone that drives out there, like stop using your phones. Don't be distracted. There's people on the road. Our cars are weapons. We could be driving as slow as 20 miles per hour and it can cause major injury, potentially killing someone. So it's also the responsibility on the person behind the wheel to make sure that we're driving safely. So just wanted to put that PSA out there. People tend to forget. We could ask for crossing guards, we could ask for stop signs, even for more police officers. But at the end of the day, if the person behind the wheel isn't following the rules, doesn't matter.
That's an excellent point. I think we get so comfortable driving our cars that we forget, right, the
Yeah.
actual like potential for harm. And you think that, you got to get to your appointment on time, not realizing like the consequence of that. It's not worth it at the end of the day. So I appreciate that. City Councilor Pepén, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Pleasure has been mine. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you. I'm Belen Dumont, reporter editor for the Latino News Network and your host. Thank you all for listening.